Hello BookTube! Welcome back to All the World's a Page, and my name is Janelle. So today I want to talk about my writing, research, and inspiration TBR, and it is quite hefty. So recently I've decided that I really want to put a lot of my focus and a lot of my energy back into my writing because I want to be able to look back on this time and look at something that I physically produced. And so for me that's writing. And so yeah, I have a lot of creative energy right now, and I really want to focus on production. So I came to the conclusion that I had to pick one of my writing projects, and I selected one that is about World War II and about Soviet snipers, including some of whom who are women. And so I realized that in order to write this, I would have to do a lot of research, and I came up with a TBR of about 15 or so books, and I would like to share that with you today. The first book I have here today is Lady Death, The Memoirs of Stalin's Sniper by Lyudmila Pavlichenko. Here we go. So Pavlichenko was, oh, and I apologize in advance for so many Russian names, which I'm sure I'm going to be butchering. Please do accept my apologies and sincerest regrets. So she's one of the most notorious and successful female snipers of all time. She left university in 1941, I believe, to join the Red Army, and she passed up becoming a nurse in order to become a sniper, and she was very, very good at it. So these are her memoirs. She survived the war, and she traveled across the world. She even, I believe, met President Reagan to talk about her experiences. And yeah, so I thought that this would be number one on my list for what it would be like to be a female sniper in the Soviet Army during World War II. So there you have it. Next up, I have Avenging Angels, Young Women of the Soviet Women's World War II Sniper Corps by Luba, Vinogradova. So again, this is about female Soviet snipers, but this is just beyond Lyudmila Pavlichenko. This is also about other women during this period, and I don't know too much about it, but it was highly recommended to me, and so yeah, and it's not very long. It's like 230 or so pages, so it shouldn't take me too long to read. So hopefully that turns out to be a fruitful endeavor. Now, next I have Notes of a Russian Sniper by Vassili Zaitzev. And this is my last sniper memoir, I promise. Now this is an autobiographical account of a male sniper during this period, and this memoir inspired the film Enemy at the Gates with Jude Law. I personally have not seen that movie. I've heard that it's quite historically inaccurate, but that it's a good film, so I'm probably not going to watch it, but just in case you were curious why this book was familiar, that's why. So this was written by Zaitzev himself, and then later translated, and so it's just, although I can't find the name of the translator on here, otherwise I would name the translator for you. So yeah, so he was one of the deadliest snipers in the Red Army, and he survived the war and lived to write this tale. So next is a book that many of you probably will have heard and that I did review on my channel at one point, and that is The Unwomanly Face of War by Svetlana Alexievich, an oral history of women in World War II. Now, Svetlana Alexievich is a Nobel Prize winner in journalism. She compiled all these memories and tales of women who served in the Soviet Army during World War II, and she strung them all together, and they are just absolutely heartbreaking. They are so harrowing and so raw, it just breaks you to read. And I read this book 2 years ago, and it took me so long to review because it left such a grip on me, and I can barely even describe it. It's just such an essential read, and so even and I originally received this as an ARC, an advanced reader copy, because it was being re-released. It was originally published in the 80s, I believe, but it was being republished with like a new cover and everything. And but then I later bought my own copy because I loved it so much. So I'm definitely going to be referencing this quite a bit. So even though I've already read it, it's good to have lying around, quite handy. Next up is The Calvary Maiden, Journals of a Russian Officer in the Napoleonic Wars by Nadezhda Durova, translated by Mary Fleming Zirin. So a few years ago, I read a book called The Girl Who Fought Napoleon, and it was a fictitious account of a woman who was an officer, a cavalry officer, during the Napoleonic Wars, and it was based off of this memoir. This memoir was written by Nadezhda herself and tells the tale of what it was like to disguise herself as a man to join the army, and apparently it's quite fascinating. I personally have not read it yet, but I've heard it's very good, and it's a little bit obscure, and you might be wondering, why are you reading memoir about something that takes place in the 1800s when your novel is going to be taking place in the late 1930s and 1940s? And well, because I think it still will tell me a lot about sort of the Russian attitudes towards women in male-dominated fields and what it's like to be a lone woman amongst many men. And so it will, and also to the sort of the experience of Russian women in the military. So I think it's just going to be really fascinating. Now, on to the actual accounts of war. I have Ivan's War, and there's a subtitle here too. Life and Death in the Red Army from 1939 to 1945. Part of the post-it, there's a sticker here that says personal information about me, so because I got this book from the library, so I had to put a post-it note over it because I don't trust all of you. This is the internet after all. So this is a comprehensive account of the Red Army and the advances it made, the progressions, and the what life was like for the soldiers. Also too with what their interactions with the civilian world was like. So I think this will be incredibly helpful, and this will help give me kind of a bird's eye view of what the army was doing during this time and help me plot out events and circumstances that happen in the book. Now, you cannot write about Soviet Russia without knowing about Stalin. And I currently know very little about Stalin. So to remedy that, I am going to read Stalin, New Biography of a Dictator by Oleg V. Khlevniuk, translated by Nora Seligman-Farobov. This was recommended to me by Michael from Knowledge Lost. I will leave a link to his channel down below. He reads a lot of Russian literature, and so he recommended this biography of Stalin for me. I do not know that much about it, except for that it is supposed to be quite comprehensive. I also have Conversations with Stalin by Milan Đilas, I believe. And I believe these are just conversations that Stalin had before he died. And yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. This one's quite short, but this will help give me, ideally, a more robust idea of Stalin's inner life and his motivations. Now, I also have several books that are fiction on my TBR, and that is to help me understand the Russian culture better. And first up is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. So this book is very popular. I don't think I really need to tell you very much about it, but it's all about love and about a woman in the late 1800s in Russia. And yeah, I just hope that it gives me a better clue as to Russian history and Russian culture, and hopefully some inspiration. It's quite thick, as you can tell, and the print's quite small. But I've actually been meaning to read this for years, even before this project was even in my head. So, and even though it does feel a little bit weird to be reading a Tolstoy novel in late June, sometimes you can't just, sometimes you just can't wait for winter to curl up with cozy Russian novels. So there you have it. I also have a collection of Russian fairy tales, and it's just called Russian Fairy Tales. And this is a very old copy. Again, I got it from the library, so pardon the sticker and the post-it. Yeah, hopefully, again, this will help me understand, like, Russian folklore a bit better and Russian culture. Now, the last two books I have aren't about Russia, and they aren't about the Soviet Union, and and one isn't even about World War II, but they are about war. And I think it's really important to understand sort of the current literature on war, because I want to ideally add to that narrative, and so understanding the current zeitgeist and the current story being told around it is really important. And so first up, I have Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. I don't think I need to explain what this is about because everyone's heard of it. But yeah, it's a World War II novel, and I'm about 100 pages in so far. It is quite funny, and which I was not expecting. I was not expecting it to be that funny, but there you have it. And last but not least, I have Matterhorn by Karl Marlantes, and this is about this is a novel about Vietnam and the American-Vietnamese War. And you may be wondering, Janelle, why are you reading a book that takes place 20 years later after your book is finished? So yes, Vietnam does take place much later, but people can't talk about books about war without talking about Matterhorn, so I thought it was important to read, because if you want to add to the conversation, you should see what everyone else has already been saying, if that makes sense. So don't just jump in with what you have to say, wait and see what others have to say first. There's my brief analogy. Sorry if this seems a bit clipped. I already filmed this earlier, and my computer just deleted the footage. Somehow the file was corrupted or something, so if I seem a little bit brisk or abrupt, that's why. I've already said this all before. Hopefully you got something out of it, and I bring this up because I want to say these are the books that I will ideally be reading over the next couple months, so you can expect, if there's any that you would like to see reviews on or wrap-ups or anything like that, let me know. But if you were curious and were thinking, why is Janelle suddenly reading lots of books about war and about Soviet Russia? That's why. So I'm also planning on filming a video on sort of like my vacation TBR, not because I'm going on vacation, but because I might need like a brief reprieve from all of these heavy books about death and about dying and war, and so I'm planning on filming like a happy vacation reprieve TBR where I talk about the lovely happy books that I need, that are quite short, I'm going to read in between to give me a little break. Things like Nora Roberts and the like. So, and what else? Nora Roberts and Wicked and Call the Midwife. Stay tuned for that TBR. It will be coming up soon. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you on soon. Bye!